from Arizona. Okay, sweet. We got the live stream sorted out. We've got Kobe, Lewis. I mean, Dave, if you guys want to chime in, that's cool. If not, I get it. I usually don't talk on these live streams either. But let's go ahead and get started on this. So today we're going to cover how to invest in rental real estate. And before we actually jump into it, I just want to kind of lay out how the situation is for the people who are newer. It's, these meetings are pretty laid back. If you have any questions at any point, you can feel free to unmute yourselves and just chime in, or hop on the chat and type something in and we can get that question answered for you. The whole goal of this is after you see through this little presentation we have is if you feel confident about going out and buying your next rental property, and give you some thoughts about, your strategies. We have some different strategies on how to invest in rental real estate here. And, they can vary depending on what your goals are. So that being said, let's just go ahead and hop right in. The first thing we do before we do that is actually some announcements. So the next meetup, let me correct this. Sorry, is Rob Eaton. He's actually going to be speaking on hard money lending. So Rob Eaton is a hard money lender out of Washington, D.C. He lends across the United States and even into other countries outside the United States. So it'd be pretty interesting to hear what he's got to say about hard money lending, especially in the current environment. That next meeting is on Wednesday, November 17th from 6 to 8 p.m. and that's Eastern Standard Time. And then just a couple of internal announcements. We had a 43 lot mobile home park deal close here in Virginia this month. So we're celebrating that a little bit and getting things rolling on that. We've also got a 32 lot. And that one's in another state that we're supposed to close on next month. So if anybody has any mobile home park deals, we purchase within 4 to 5 hours of Harrisonburg, Virginia, and it's got to be at least 25 lots. But if anybody has any deals, hopefully you think of us and can let us know. We can work out a fee or something. So now we're going to hop right into the rental real estate. So I'm going to not try to read from the slides and just give you basically an overview of everything. So obviously rental real estate investing is just the main goal of doing it for either cash flow or appreciation. So you're buying a property to either help supplement or replace your income, or you might be looking for it for long-term appreciation gains or tax benefits. So those are kind of the main three reasons that a lot of people will invest in real estate. So we have a few examples here. So traditional market rate rentals, like your single family house rental or a multifamily property, that's your traditional market rate rental. You've got Airbnb or short-term rentals. So like professional rentals would also qualify for that. And land leases. So land lease, for an example, would be like a mobile home park. For today's presentation, we're only going to be talking about the traditional rentals and that whole structure. So how to evaluate those deals. So here's some benefits of holding real estate in a great market. You've got appreciation, which we talked about before, depreciation, which are tax benefits, interest write-offs. If you have a mortgage, that'll help with your taxes as well. You've got the actual cash flow, which is your net after all the expenses, and then your mortgage pay down. So paying down that mortgage over time from the rent coming in. And we're going to go over a couple of different strategies about how you can get into rental real estate, because a lot of people, if you're either starting off or you've started to grow where your cash is kind of an issue, these are some of the strategies that you can kind of use to expand if those are starting to be an issue for you. So the first one is a pretty popular one called BRRRR investing, which Brandon Turner off of Bigger Pockets talks about quite a bit. So you still have to get the down payment to buy that original property, but from there you're renovating it, you're finding a tenant to rent it, you're refinancing it and pulling that money back out, and then you're using that money to then buy another property. The next option is seller financing. That's one that's not talked about quite as much. We do a good amount of seller financing deals as far as the commercial space is involved, but For single family, it's still something that goes on. So you just have to kind of know how to talk to the seller about it, because there's a lot of benefits for somebody that's selling a property just to seller finance it to you. Cross collateralization loans or equity lines of credit. So these are an example of where maybe you already have a rental property that's paid off. You're using that property to then buy one or two or X amount more. And same with equity lines of credit. If you have a primary residence, you're using that to go ahead and that equity in your primary home to purchase another property. And then there's some other strategies too that we can talk about a little bit if there's some interest here today. Is, subject twos. We've got master leases. I would say master leases are probably more common in more of a commercial space with larger deals that are heavily distressed. And those are kind of the ones right off the top of the forefront that are most commonly used, aside from doing conventional financing. And again, if anybody has any questions about any of these as we're going through, or wants to chime in with anything, then just feel free to drop it in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves and we can talk about that. So hopping into BRRRR really quick, just to elaborate a little bit more on it. Things to keep in mind about this strategy is just to make sure that you have enough equity in the property after the renovation or refinance for substantial, to get your cash back out that you've put down essentially. And depending on what your strategy is, if you're trying to supplement your income with cash flow, then you need to make sure that you're cash flowing after the refinance. If you're just looking to amass a bunch of properties and you don't mind if they break even, you're just looking for either appreciation or tax benefits, you need to make sure that you're at least breaking even after refinance. So that's some stuff you can look at beforehand. You'll likely have to wait at least 6 months after purchasing the property to do a cash out refinance. If you have heard of any of these things where people are getting 30-year fixed investment loans, then they have a seasoning period, and that seasoning period is usually about 6 months. If anybody's seeing anything differently, feel free to speak up, but that's been our experience, especially with the current market environment with COVID and everything. The lending on investment properties for longer term amortized loans has gotten even trickier. So still happening, but that's kind of the stipulation there, is you got to have a seasoning period. And usually it's difficult to get it after about four properties where they stop trying to do that 30-year fixed loan. So private banks and stuff like that can do it, but those are all things just to keep in mind about this strategy. So seller financing is something that could be almost its own topic for sure. It's definitely an awesome financing strategy. It's my favorite because you can basically do whatever you and the seller agree to. So, a lot of these investment loans are needing 20% down if you are just getting a standard one through a bank, and that's going to use up a lot of cash really quickly if you're buying several $100,000 or $200,000 properties. So you can make your cash go further if you could find sellers that finance it with either less down or potentially even no money down. They are rare to have the no money down situations, but even if you can only get 15% or 10% or even the full 20%, there's still some benefits to that we can touch on here really quick. But first, why would a seller even agree to seller financing? First is they're extremely motivated to get out of the property. So you're helping them. And the seller also might want some income and doesn't want to take a big tax hit. That's a main reason right there, especially if it's an older seller or someone who doesn't want to just get the lump sum up front, is that seller finance can help them with their taxes. And then you can also make a higher price. You can make a higher offer price to a seller with more attractive terms to you. So some things to think about when you're doing your numbers on a property is you would likely have more buying costs for your closing to go in. You'd likely have an appraisal and possibly some loan fees, especially if you're using hard money lending. They charge several points generally. So you can actually make a higher offer price and it still be the same to you, but then you could also have better terms than a loan would have. So for example, you can negotiate something with a tiered interest rate, or something that we have to do a good amount of times with rougher properties, if they're, a cash flowing asset, is have it to where your first payment isn't for 90 days to give you time to stabilize the property if it's something that's rough, or if you need to fix it up, for example. So those are all things you could do. You could have a year with interest only, and then it amortizes. You can do a bunch of different things. So a couple of things to keep in mind about this strategy, though, is you shouldn't really rush into asking about seller financing, especially if you're saying for little or no money down. Because if you propose that right off the bat with little money down, it makes it seem like you don't have the capital needed to be buying, especially if it needs to be fixed up. They're going to wonder if you have the money to actually fix it up. It's something you kind of have to just ease into, but in a lot of cases, it makes a lot of sense for sellers to do that. So it's really understanding the strategy, and it's, again, something we can talk about a little bit more, but that's one thing to do, is just, you want to make sure that when you're offering seller financing, if you try to go towards a little no money down, you want to tier that in as you go through the process. It's generally not like, unless they're extremely motivated, you don't want to be doing that immediately. The other thing is the seller is now your bank. So a lot of times you'll need to have a track record or some way to show that you'll be able to make the payments and satisfy the terms of your agreement. They might want to see funds in your account in order for the down payment. Or they just may want to see, that's the thing, is when you're dealing with a seller, they might want to see some crazy things, just as, for example, they want to see what other properties you own, or like just, knowing that you actually have done this before. And the final thing I'll say about seller financing, one of the things I like about it a lot, is if you get a loan through a bank, and this is especially helpful on commercial properties, but if you get a loan through a bank, most of the time, if not all of the time, they're going to require what's called a personal guarantee, or have you be the guarantor for the property. So essentially, if something were to happen and you default on the loan, then they were going to come after your personal assets as well. Even if you have an LLC, they still generally have you as the manager personally sign on the loan. Now, in larger assets, multifamily, where the loans are over $1 million and stuff, they have loans where you don't have that. So you're not going to have to worry about your financial risk, as long as you don't commit fraud or anything, essentially. And you can basically make that a term of your seller financing as well. So that's one thing that I really like about it, because unless you're getting into those larger properties, non-recourse loans, which is what that's called, is not available. Sometimes, if you're doing hard money lending, it might be, but if you're doing a typical loan, it's not. So that's one of the things that's really nice about this as well. Cross collateralization equity lines of credit, they're pretty straightforward, so we're not going to touch a whole lot on them. It's just basically using the equity from one piece of property to purchase another. So the lender just puts the lien on one property with the equity in order to loan on the new property that you're getting. Very popular strategy, especially among, at least where we are, that older people will have used, either use this, or they take a property and put a line of credit on it and use it as basically like a cash in an account. So again, very popular strategy. So you need to be careful that you aren't overextending yourself. So if you have a bunch of deals that don't cash flow a lot, and then you start to have repairs stacking up, you could have some cash flow issues. So you just got to be aware of that. And HELOCs and other equity lines of credit that are secured by real estate are similar to the above strategy, but they have the potential of, one, having higher interest rates, and then two, depending on the type of line of credit, you can have them, interest rates fluctuate month to month. So that's kind of a risk you need to be aware of. Right now we've had such low interest rates the past, what has it been, 9 years or so, that it hasn't even mattered. But there will be a period when that changes. Who never knows when that is, but that's just a risk to keep in mind. But any questions on either the equity lines of credit or seller financing or BRRRR or anything so far? I just don't want to bore you guys going through, and some of this stuff is kind of dry. Okay, well, I guess we'll just keep trucking on. It looks like we haven't lost any participants yet, so let's keep rolling. So what we're going to get into here is we're going to have some rules of thumb. And then after this, we're actually going to go through we're either going to have market analysis next or an actual deal. So that way you kind of see like how to evaluate deals too. And again, some of this stuff's dry, but it's really good information. So starting off with the rules of thumb, Ratish, hopefully I'm not saying your name wrong. We're having this live stream, so we're actually gonna have it recorded on our website. So you'll be able to check it out, and I can afterwards, after we finish everything up, shoot the link for our website. But all of our meetups are on there, so you can refer back to anything we've had. So we've had everything from short-term rentals, fix and flips, but all that's on the website, and they can be referred to anytime. So yeah, we'll be set on that.
That's good. That's good then. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Hopefully you still stick around, but yeah, those things are up there for anybody to watch anytime.
For sure. Yeah.
So rules of thumb for rental properties. Again, these are things that are just really quick analysis to maybe give you an idea. Some people use different rules of thumb for their own strategy. So you need to find the right one that works for you. But here are just a couple of examples. And, this is just kind of saying, again, nothing's going to be detailed analysis, but just if you're starting to look at a lot of deals, you're going to start to gravitate towards a couple of rules of thumb that is really going to help you. So these are some examples that we either use or have used in the past. So for example, the first one, 5 to 10% of the monthly rent for property maintenance. A lot of the times we're doing about 8, but it really depends on the rental amount. So if you have a higher rental amount, then it's going to be a lower percentage generally, unless the property is very large. So I'm giving you a lot of exceptions, but some of that's just kind of common sense and you get the feel for it, but that's kind of a range there for property maintenance. We got 10% of the monthly rent for vacancy. So, keep in mind that right now vacancy rates are so low, it's generally like 5% or less. But if you can look at a deal and it pencils out with a 10% monthly rent for vacancy, then that's probably a very good deal. Honestly, how we've looked at things is we generally don't even really look at a vacancy if it's a single family house, just because if you're adding all these percentages up, there's almost no way to have a deal that cash flows. So you've got to look at one and kind of understand your market. If it's a market where there has a lot of vacancy, then obviously you're going to have to put some number in there for your analysis. But if it's a number where, again, there's a lot of rental demand just historically, no matter what the market cycle is, then you can kind of trim that down from that 10% number, because it's going to be difficult for you to find a deal. And this should probably be 8 to 10% of the monthly rent for property management. And it can even be lower than 8%. It just depends on, again, how expensive is your rent. And if you're buying multiple units at once, a lot of property management companies will give you a discount on that. But generally for single family properties, it's 8 to 10% of the rent for property management. And then 5% of the monthly rent for CapEx, which is capital expenditures. They're things like, your roof, your refrigerator, larger budget items that you're not going to spend from that account for a long time, but you need to save up for it so that when you get hit with a couple of expenses at once, you're not in a bad spot. So again, this disclosure should, these numbers mainly apply to single family or duplex properties. So any questions or thoughts on those numbers before we move on, just for kind of the analysis rules of thumb? Okay, sweet. Well, we'll keep going. So we've got the 1 or 2% rule. Is probably what most people have heard if they're familiar with kind of like the percentage rules. So basically the 1% rule is if you were to buy a property for, let's say, 100,000, then you would expect to get 1% of that in monthly cash flow. So that would be a good deal if you're getting $1,000 a month. And then, the same thing goes for 1.5% rule being that you'd be expecting to get 1,500 and 2% is 2,000. So with this rule, you need to base off your comfort zone, but also be realistic with your market. I don't know if I've ever seen a 2% rule deal in Harrisonburg. I'm sure Gavin's probably never seen one in Charlottesville. It's probably hard to find even a 1% deal in Charlottesville. Is that what you're seeing, Gavin?
Sure, it's hard to get the rent to cover the high mortgage.
Yeah, it's hard to even get it to cover the mortgage. I mean, yeah, here even in Harrisonburg, I mean, even a 1% deal is hard to come by. I found that for our properties, what we're mostly seeing is we go by what we're going to go over next, which is like a $1% or dollar amount cash flow deal. But it also typically ends up being almost like a 1.5% rule. So they kind of go hand in hand with what we found. So I'll elaborate on this one next. So basically people are looking for like $150 or $200 per door or per unit rule. So basically after all expenses are paid, you're cash flowing 150 or 200 units per door, then it's a good deal. Again, just this is just a rule of thumb. So some people are okay with less because their goal is more of the appreciation stuff, and other people are good with, they want more. So I know some people that only do it if it's $300 a door. And then the thing to keep in mind with this is if you're buying properties that have more units. So I know we have some people that tune in here and join us on the meetings that they buy larger multifamilies. You're not going to get that rule. That rule kind of gets thrown out the window after you get past 4 units. So another note about this is you need to make sure that you're careful and you include your reserves for capital expense and maintenance. A lot of people don't do that when they're looking at rules, and then they think they're cash flowing 200 and they're not. So make sure you've got everything: taxes, insurance, CapEx, maintenance, and we'll go through all those lists of expenses as well here in a little bit when we do our example deal. Any questions on those rules of thumb before we head on? Okay, sweet. Here's some other things to consider. So we're, again, some pretty dry stuff to talk about, but I'm going to just go ahead and get all this stuff loaded. Some people are looking at their cash on cash return. So that's the annual percentage that you get based on the cash that you're putting in the deal. That includes your down payment, repairs, and closing costs. So we have an example there. I'm not going to read through it, but basically whatever, if you want to just read through that really quick, but essentially whatever your percentage return is after you've purchased the property and put your down payment and all expenses in there, over what you've invested, that's your annual percentage return. What are you looking for? Like, some people are fine with a 6% return. Some people want a 20% return. So understand that there's going to be a lot more 6% return deals out there than 20% return deals out there, but they're both out there and they just depend on your investment goals. Maybe cash on cash isn't even something you want to look at. Equity, for those that may not know, is just the difference between the fair value, market value of your property and the amount that you owe in debt. So if your property is worth 150 and you owe 100 on it, you've got 50,000 in equity. And so contrary to cash on cash return, some people look at what is their return on equity. So what is the annual percentage return based on the current equity value of the property? So if you've got a property value that's 100,000 and you've got 20K in mortgage debt, that means your equity is 80. If your annual cash flow is 4,800 and you have 80 grand in equity, that's a 6% annual return. So a lot of people don't talk about return on equity, but I just like to, because if you have a lot of equity in a property, then you need to kind of start to balance between what's your risk regarding like market shifts or if it becomes vacant, as opposed to thinking of it like, well, I've got 80K in equity here. That's like cash that I'm getting return on. So by me not doing this is the return I'm getting. Could I maybe refinance and get a better return, or sell it and buy a bigger property and get a bigger return? So just a good financial to think about there too. So what is a good target for cash on cash or return on equity? And unfortunately, that just depends on your personal investment goals. So only you can answer that. A good question for those that are starting off, if you're wondering, well, what's a realistic one? I would, depending on where you are and where your market is, I would just advise that you check out a lot of deals, and you'll start to see what the range of cash on cash returns are. And then you can have your goal if you want to go for the higher end of that, or if you're more moderate. Same thing with return on equity. You'll be able to see how quickly the market's shifting and what realistic return on equity goals are. So we're even going to get into researching a market. So let's say you're from out of the area and you're looking to invest in Harrisonburg, or you're in Harrisonburg, you want to invest in another market and do it, remotely. Then here's what we look for, especially when we're going out of state to invest. We don't own a whole lot, but we are buying some. So it's, first of all, it's important that you invest in property that has a good market that you also understand. But here's some of the main things we look for. One is population growth, job growth. You've got diverse employment, and we have a kind of a preferential treatment towards government, education, and healthcare jobs. And that's because in the event that there's a market shift in economics, like another recession, or if something happened kind of like 2008, then government, education, and healthcare jobs, like universities, hospitals, they're always going to be around. They're more recession resistant. So thinking about other jobs like that, like what if this area were to get hit hard, what would be lost? If you have one big employer that is a private company that does whatever, let's say they make TVs or something, well, they can maybe get that outsourced overseas, and then what's your job market? What are they going to do for work? How are they going to pay rent if that employer goes away? Low crime rates, particular neighborhood investment. What's the school district and school rating? Now, as we're going down through here, some of this stuff gets more and more nuanced. So it just depends on, again, how particular you want to be. Some crime rates in neighborhoods, I mean, some areas the school district makes a lot of difference if you're doing an out of area flip. Other places, not that big of a deal. So it's kind of understanding your market there too. And low crime rates doesn't mean it has to be extremely, like, basically nothing. It's also understanding what type of crime, and so again, you'll get an idea as you research the market on that. Median income, that way you know what rents the renter base can afford. And then median home price. So that way you can see if you have a renter, what's preventing them from getting a home. If home prices are super cheap, then you need to have a compelling reason that it's still a renter's market there. Because there are some markets out there that are a little bit odd in the sense that they have low home prices, but renters will pay a lot in rent, and there's a lot of renters. So those are kind of the main things off the top. I elaborate probably a little bit more than I should have on all of them, but that gives you a good idea to kind of go from if you are looking to enter a new market, or even just check out your own to see how it does. So we've got a site here. It's called datausa.io that has a lot of the information that we're talking about. So Harrisonburg here is the example. We've got the population, we've got the household income, it even shows the poverty rate, number of employees, median property value. So let's get into some tips here for the analysis. And these are mainly for once you get past the rules of thumb, it looks like a deal that might be interesting. Here's some basically tips about what to do next. So first is get actual insurance quotes from an agent. And that doesn't have to be like actually doing all the work and getting the paperwork filled out. You could just, if you have a good relationship with an agent, give them a call. If you're staying in the same market, a lot of times you'll start to get a feel for what the prices of insurance are pretty roughly. So making sure you have the actual taxes for the property, and that's like the most recent year possible, because sometimes if they reassess, the taxes could go up or down quite a bit. And then making sure that depending on where you're investing, is it taxed twice? So is it in the city where you have city and county taxes, or is it just county taxes? That make a lot of difference in your numbers that you're getting in cash flow. And then the CapEx and maintenance percentages. So those amounts can vary depending on the rental range and size of the property. So, a small, like the example is a smaller $1,100 a month property may only need 5% maintenance and 5% CapEx, but a larger property that is also renting the same amount per month may need more in maintenance and CapEx. If you have questions on that, we recommend talking to either local investors, local property management companies, sometimes even local real estate agents that also do a lot of rental stuff. They'd be able to help out with it. So the big thing there is you can just ask those types of people to lean on their expertise. And try not to get analysis paralysis. If you start looking for deals heavily, it'll probably take a while for you to find your first one, but after just staring at deals for a while, a good one's going to be like it'll jump out to you. So try not to overthink it either. Any questions on any of this stuff that we've covered so far? Just checking the chat real quick. Adele, sorry. Can you talk about market segmentation? Yeah, so what exactly do you mean by market segmentation? If I know anything about it, I'll be happy to talk about it. But if I don't, then I'll just honestly, I'll be quick to say I don't know. Do you mean, so he's asking rental versus flip? Do you mean?
I didn't realize that there's a microphone option here.
Yeah.
Can you take a minute here to talk about how do you evaluate your market? Because you are in 3 different counties, Shenandoah, Rockingham, and Page County, and maybe possibly more. When you go in a county like this for the sake of buying and holding versus buying and fixing and selling, do you have a criteria there? Especially if you are in the valley and you have the mountains and it's different market as well.
Yeah, so again, this is just gonna be me speaking personally about what I do. I'm gonna see if I can actually just stop the screen share for a second, and I can pull up one of the sites similar to datausa.io that we use. This is one that's gonna be shared at the end of the slideshow. It'll be one of the sites that we kind of share to give you a link. Let's see if I can share this really quick. All right, I always get nervous sharing stuff. I mean, I don't have anything weird on my computer, but whenever you're sharing a new screen on Zoom, you just see so many horror stories. But anyway, should be set to go here. Can you guys see this? It's bestplaces.net. Just say yes or type something in the chat so I know we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, sweet. So if anyone, I don't know if we've gone over this stuff before in another meetup, but this is what I use a lot. So to answer the question about rental versus flip, I don't really look at the market stuff like I had before. And what I mean by that is, if you're going into a market where median housing prices are higher, I'm automatically thinking, okay, it's probably more of a flip market, because lower housing prices, you can make the rental numbers work a lot easier generally because your mortgage is lower. So I guess that's kind of my answer to that question. Is if I was looking at this stuff and I saw, hey, population's growing, median income's growing, home price is strong, with it being over 250, I'd probably be thinking, all right, this is probably more of like a flipping market because it's appreciating, it's got growth. I'm sure you can still find rental deals there, but then if my goal was rental real estate or to hold long term, then I would start reaching out to kind of the stronger agents in the area to get a feel of that, and then just watching deals too. And that's another question for also property management companies. Does that kind of help with that, Adele? Because there's another cool thing I want to share about this too, that you kind of got my thoughts on for.
That's awesome. Thanks, sir.
That's good. You got it?
Yep. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah, no problem. So what I wanted to share about this is like, it's just got so much information here that it's really helpful if you're entering a new area. Like, one of the things we look at a lot is what's your competition like? So let's say back to kind of like Adele was talking about, you are getting ready to do rentals, then you're wondering what everything is like. So here it shows you, okay, renters make up 57.4% of the Harrisonburg population. 2.4% of the apartments in Harrisonburg are available to rent. And you can confirm all this stuff with the local property management company, but it shows you the rental market is strong. Real estate is relatively young there overall in Harrisonburg. It's 32 years old. There's a lot of other markets that are a lot older. But this is stuff you can all find out really quickly. And you've got, and these again are very rough numbers that you can confirm with other sites and stuff that we'll go over here in a little bit. But you can see what even the rents are to give you just kind of a rough idea. This is an awesome site. So it's really helpful. Any questions or anyone? I mean, this has the crime and everything on it here too. So any questions with this, or anyone want to check out this some more, or should we just hop back over to the slideshow?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to know the market. Maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe, you mentioned flips versus rentals, and I was thinking, what do you want from the rental? The flipping is short-term income, and so you're taxed at a regular rate. But the rental property, you have all the benefits of the depreciation and the amortization, and even if you have regular W-2 income, it could potentially help you with taxes. But that $200, $300 in rental income, you're not going to want to count on using that money to pay the bills. That's kind of like supporting the asset so that you can hold it for longer than a year, and then it's long-term capital gains. Well, that's all.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like it seems like unless you get an extremely good deal, then I don't want to say you don't see that cash flow, but I mean, like with houses, at least it's kind of like you were saying, Gavin, mortgages are expensive. If you have 4 different houses and each one is cash flowing $200 to $300 a month, and you have one tenant that stops paying, like that's probably the majority of your cash flow, So like you're saying, it just depends on kind of your goal there. But I think it's kind of like what it sounded like, if you can do the rental, it makes sense to do it long-term just because of the tax benefits and having longer term capital gains. If you can at least hold it a year, just depends on your goals and everything. Let's see.
Some of the appreciation I've seen, for example, I have a property that I've had for 8 years, and there's people that came in and bought, 4 or 5 years after I bought, and then they just recently sold and made a profit. But it's like people come in and get out, come in and get out. But if you sit, you kind of gain all of it, but it's harder to hold on to it because they can't sell.
Yeah. Well, like you noted too, you had somebody that came in 4 years after you and they sold and you're still holding on to it. But like, you've probably got a solid amount of equity. And right now, the nice thing too is like, I don't know how Charlottesville is. It's probably a lot different. I'm sure it's definitely a lot different from here, but we've actually had a good amount of rental growth, which historically it's like mostly flat, So like, if you're holding on to it, you've got equity and then your rents have gone up, then you can refinance and pull money out tax-free. Like that's the best thing you can do,
Yeah, it's a pretty good personal ATM with HELOC and stuff, but it's kind of weird. The single family investor has to put up his personal home, but for the bigger deal you mentioned, there's potential for non-recourse financing.
Yeah. That's I wish they would have some product that could go away with that, but that's why if you can get seller financing and just And I found sellers generally don't have an issue with doing the non-recourse because it makes perfect sense. Like, hey, I've got other investments. I'm going to do everything in my power to get this cash flowing asset going. But like, if something crazy were to happen, I don't want to lose everything, but that's how banks treat single family investors. It's pretty crazy. Let's see. We got Steven's asking, can you talk on student housing in Harrisonburg? Okay. I honestly would not feel comfortable talking on student housing in Harrisonburg, and that's because I haven't done it. I've heard a lot about it. I've thought about doing it. We could probably get I know a couple local property management companies that do a lot of student housing there in Harrisonburg. I honestly have no idea what the vacancy rate is. Generally, you're dealing with both the students and the parents because the parents are guarantors on the lease. And it does make it hard to refinance so many leases on one house. I would say that generally won't really matter. Like, if you are doing it, and it depends how the house is, but let's just assume it's a regular house with 4 bedrooms and they're just renting out the rooms like how they normally do, and it's not any weird house configuration, then they're probably going to evaluate the house as if it's a regular single family house. They're not going to give you like a higher valuation because it's a student rental, if that makes sense for your appraisal. So that shouldn't really matter regarding a refinance, but I guess I'm just trying to have you keep in mind that they're going to look at it as if it's just a regular house and it doesn't get any premium because it's a student rental. And that's generally what I've seen. Is the cash flow a lot higher? And the answer is generally yes. So I guess the pros about that is you've got the parents as a guarantor. So in case they tear it up, that generally helps mitigate your risk. And if they were to skip their lease or something, you obviously have them on the parents on the lease as well to prevent that issue from happening. Your cash flow is generally higher because let's say you have a house that would rent for $1,100 and you're renting it for $400 a room, then you've got $1,600 as opposed to $1,100. So you've got that higher cash flow. The wear and tear is generally higher on the property, so your maintenance cost is higher. And then I'm not 100% sure how the leasing structure works because your kind of risk there is you've got a couple of months or you have to lease it a year in advance to get the students in there, because if you miss kind of the leasing window, at least from the operators that I know that do like larger scale student housing, then you basically lost the majority of that year in student housing income. And that's because of how they do their leasing. Hopefully that makes sense. And then you've got the period over the summer too, where I really don't want to speak on that. I believe a lot of times they're written into the lease, but I think sometimes that period, it just kind of depends if they're even paying for that, if the lease ends before then. So that I'm not 100% sure on. Does that help with things, Stephen?
Got to find the unmute button. Yes, that definitely helps. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem. I don't want to talk too much on it because, just to be honest, I'm talking based on what I've know from other people that do it, but I've never done it. So I think,
okay.
I think it could be a good thing though, for sure.
Yeah, that definitely helped. Thank you.
Let's switch over here and do a quick deal. If I can switch the screen. Okay. So we were going to do a live deal, and basically even the people that don't want to talk, just in the chat as we go through this, we're going to get to a part where I want to hear your opinion if you think this is a good deal or not. And the thing is, there's no wrong answers. So let's get started here. This is just, a fake house. They're asking $61,000. I have a picture, but it's really not important. But let's say it's just a small house. It's 1961 is when it was built. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath on a 1/4 acre lot. Total square footage is 750. Its taxes is $427 a year. The tax assessment is what the TA is $67,700. Market rent, we're pretty sure on the rent here, it's between 750 to 775. And the estimated market value after repairs is 84,000. So we've got a $5,000 estimated renovation. Let's say the roof's good, all the big stuff's good, just need some cosmetic stuff. So it's $5,000 to renovate it, get it rented for that market rate we're talking about, and get you to that $84,000 value. Assume you got a loan for 80% of the purchase price at 4.5% interest with a 25-year amortized loan and had to come out of pocket for the repairs. Is this a good deal for you? And what's going to get tricky is you may have to have a loan calculator or something regarding the mortgage payment there. But if anyone came across that deal, what would you think? And feel free again to type in the chat. I want to hear what everybody's thoughts are. Let me see if I can do a poll. Maybe I can do a poll. I cannot do a poll. So yeah, just in the chat, if you think this is a deal. No, the full market value. So I guess you're talking like if you flipped it, but no, let's just pretend that the 84,000, no matter what you did, is the top. Even if you gutted it and redid it, it's still just 84,000.
Can you go back to the previous slide very quickly?
Sorry, I couldn't really hear that. What was that?
Can you go back to the previous slide?
Sure, yeah. So what we're trying to do too is use those rules of thumb we did earlier about, maintenance and property management or insurance and everything. So we got one vote in. We got two votes in so far. I'm going to use this opportunity while everybody's crunching the numbers to grab a quick glass of water. So I'll be back in just 1 or 2 minutes. All right, we got a quick question. $750 in rent. What do we think the monthly expenses are? So we are assuming the taxes are $427 a month. I'm going to add one more in that your insurance is $450 a year. I actually have this on the next slide, but and maybe a little bit lower since it's a smaller property. and you've got a loan with 80% of the value in loan and 4.5% interest, 20 years. So that would be, try and get you the monthly amount for that. It is a little tricky if you didn't have an amortization calculator to do that, but trying to give you the real deal because you had to do this, you know, based off a Zillow listing or something, you'd have to do this similarly. So that monthly payment would be $308.73. So hopefully that helps with the numbers. I'm going to go through, got quite a few answers in. So we've got, let's see, no, yes, no. It was looking like 3 no's and a yes. This is again here to help you out with the numbers there. I should have probably had that up before, but again, I kind of wanted to do it to where you would have to look up the actual mortgage balance and stuff as if you were actually doing it for the mortgage payment.
Who that service? Internet service provider. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else want to submit any opinions on that, or anyone want to change their opinion? So here's what we got in cash flow. And I went ahead and put the estimated cash on cash return for you. So depending on if that's maybe one of the things that you look at, you've got that number there to see if it would meet your criteria. So now those people that answered it, I mean, do you think it'd still be the same answer, or would you be changing your answer based on seeing the numbers now? I'm going to assume everybody's going to keep their answer the same, but so yeah, I mean, the answer to that too is it really depends. If you're on the lower end of the scale and you want at least 150 in cash flow and you've got a little bit of equity, because you would have, let's say after closing costs, about 70 grand in a property that's worth 84,000 when it's all said and done. It could be a good deal. If you want the cash flow percentage, then it might meet that criteria for you. If you want it higher, then it might not. Me personally, it wouldn't be. I want a little bit more in cash flow, and I generally try to have about 80% all in of what the aftermarket value is too, if possible. So it's got that checkbox checked, but not the cash flow amount. So it's my 2 cents on it. Yep. Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Yeah, the 1% rule really helps out with that one too. So you've got it, once you're all in, it's a little bit over the 1% rule, but like you said, once you factor all the numbers in, it might not meet the actual cash flow. Yeah. So I don't know. It seems like a lot of people, the 1% rule, it's generally like 1.5% is where it's more likely to pencil out if you're looking for over 200 a month cash flow, just from what I've seen. And yeah, I agree with the appreciation too. And if you're trying to add an added layer of making things confusing, it's like, well, how likely is this thing to appreciate? If it's a smaller home, unless it's a really good area, it's probably not as likely. But no wrong answers there. Yes or no it could be a good deal. It just depends on who's looking at it. So we're going to talk, we're pretty much wrapping things up here. We're almost done, but one of the most important things about investing in general is mitigating as much risk as you can. You know, at the end of the day, you've got to just do a deal if you haven't done one before, but always try to mitigate as much risk as you can. So here's some things that we can do, and some things to think about. So one of the first questions you need to ask yourself is, what if the market shifts or your rental is vacant for an extended period of time? How can you mitigate risks? So the first is you just buy so you have an equity cushion beyond your down payment. I think that was Dave that was talking about that. My chat is not zooming well, but I think it was Dave was saying that, you know, it didn't have enough extra equity there. So basically, if, you know, if the market turned and you had to sell, you want to make sure that you're preferably not losing money at the very least, especially your initial investment. So that is one way to mitigate risk. So essentially you do that by getting a better deal. The next is kind of the same thing, which is be conservative. So in the event that rental rates drop, can you still make money or break even? So if rental rates drop or it's vacant, how long of a vacancy, you know, how much money do you have set aside for an emergency like that? Those are all things to think about. So the biggest thing is generally, assuming you're doing the cash flow investing side of things, you want to make sure that you're making money to begin with. You want to make sure that you have reserves for repairs and CapEx, and make sure that you're using a vacancy factor as well. Again, a lot of people now are using just 5%, even though they're seeing like virtually zero vacancy, about 5 to 10% there. And make sure once you factor in all those numbers we've been going over, that you're still making money. And then think about what would happen if some of these things above happen, so vacancy or market shifts. Buying in a good area in a great market with diverse employers can help mitigate a lot of risk from the beginning. So another thing we didn't really talk about with the markets when you're analyzing markets is if you can invest in an area where you can see that the city is clearly growing. So in Harrisonburg, this would be an example of out towards like Centera, the new hospital. There's clearly a lot of development and businesses and apartment complexes, everything going up there. So that's what's called the path of progress. So doing that, or an area where it's always going to be strong demand, such as like a vibrant downtown, for example, those things can help mitigate a lot of risk. And then this next thing is more about actually the physical condition of the property. So on the other side of mitigating risk is making sure that you don't have any issues with the property going in. And I don't mean that you're not going to run into any issues. I just mean like the bigger ticket items. So you want to make sure that, you know, your roof is good, your foundation and structural components are good. You don't have any, you know, like large, a lot of damage from termites, for example, that sort of thing. A lot of this can be done with a home inspection. As you invest more, I know a lot of investors don't even do home inspections. They just kind of inspect the property themselves. But no matter how much you do, you got to make sure that you're still checking the big ticket items. Another thing that's not talked about a lot is zoning. So you want to be sure to check your zoning and make sure that you can actually do what you're trying to do. So if you're buying a property to rent long-term, depending on what area you're doing this in, a lot of times that's not as much of an issue. It's still worth checking on, but especially if you're going into a new market, you want to make sure that you can do exactly what you think you're going to be able to do with the property. So check your zoning, call the local county's office and make sure that you're good to go on that. The bigger thing with zoning that I still want to touch on, even though short-term rentals wasn't the main thing that we're talking about today, is a lot of areas are way more particular about short-term rentals. So if you're in a place that's mainly residential, they might not let you do a short-term rental. So don't think that just because I'm buying this house and it's in a neighborhood that I can use it as a short-term rental. So that's something, again, you would check with zoning and potentially even about getting a business license for with the county. So they'd be able to help you out with that stuff too. And that would basically make you have it so you're making sure that your property legally qualifies you for that investment strategy. A big one for around here, since we're a little more rural, is if you have private utilities, be very sure to get all the records from the health department. So a lot of times before, let's say 1950, 1960, if the house was built before then, you're probably not going to get the septic records, but it's still very important to check. Anytime a house has a septic and a well, it's good to do that. So one, on the septic side of things, has there been any repairs? Because a lot of times that was recorded at the health department. When was the septic system put in? What was it approved for? Not having any records is also information. You just know, hey, this is old. And if you're talking to the seller, let's say you're finding an off-market deal or you're working with an agent, you can ask them, when was the last time the septic was pumped or maintained? Like, when was the maintenance done on this? If they say, well, not since we've owned it and they've owned it 12 years, then you probably need septic repairs off the bat. Worst case scenario I've seen with this one though, and I don't mean to rant on about this, but it's very important because I've seen it where they say they have a septic and there's no septic, or the septic it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house and the septic is just basically a hole in the ground. So these are all things that could be basically deal breakers for you. So that's something not to scare you, just to make you aware of. I actually have a property right now I have under contract, and I found out today that it actually had its septic system declined. What does that mean for me? After talking to the septic company, it would mean that I'd have to spend $22,000 getting an alternative system installed. Guess who's not going to buy that deal? So those are all just important things. If anyone has any questions about that stuff, I'm happy to talk about it more. I definitely don't know everything about septic systems, but and then the next thing in addition to that is wells. Generally, if it's dug and everything there, then you can test if the water's running. You're gonna have a well company come out and do a test if you really would like. But it's still nice to get the health department records. If they have them on file, you can see how deep the well is, how many gallons per minute was flowing, and that gives you an idea of how the water supply is. Both of those are not be all end all to say that both of those systems are okay, but they help mitigate risk. And then the final thing is to confirm the property is exactly what you think you're buying by confirming with a survey on file or apply to the county courthouse. So older properties, this isn't always an option. You might either have to consider buying a survey or have the seller get one. But I would say if there's a good plat, that mitigates a lot of your risk. But again, this is one of those things where absolute worst case scenario, you might be buying a property and a building or part of the house or something like that is on another property. So if you're looking at the plat or looking at the image of the property, like through the GIS, and that looks like that could be a question, I would just advise calling the local county courthouse, seeing if they have another plat or a survey on file there. And if they don't, try to see if the seller has one, and that might be able to clear a lot of stuff up. But again, that's something where I've just heard horror stories of people buying a property and they think, maybe this whole building's on the property and it looks like it is, but it's not. So we got a question that popped up. Yeah. Gavin says due diligence got to do the do. So yep. I think that's pretty much about it. Let's see. We've got some tools and stuff here that I'm gonna leave up for everybody to jot down. But any questions on that stuff? I mean, it's a lot. I mean, it's not a lot of work, but it's a lot of little things that you can do very quickly. And the big thing I would say about this last page, if you're buying a deal, and especially if it's an off-market deal, wait till you have it under contract. There's no point in you doing all this stuff and you wasting your time if you and the seller are $30,000 apart in price. So that's just something to keep in mind too. But once you get it under contract, the reason why you need that inspection period, even if you are buying all cash and as is so you can make sure that none of these worst case scenario things are the case. So Any questions on that stuff before we move on to that next page so everybody can see the resources? All right, sweet. Let's move on. So this stuff is just helpful websites and other tools that will go over a lot of this stuff that we were talking about regarding like evaluating a market. This is a little, this page is a little bit old. So I believe, like, for example, iComps, you're welcome to try it. I don't think iComps works anymore. I have not used that recently, but Rentometer or Rentometer, whatever you want to call it, nice for seeing rental comps and what a market rate could be depending on your area. It has some limitations though. So if you're in the middle of downtown Harrisonburg or a place where there's a lot of rental comps, works great. If you're in a rural area, you know, God help you. You're probably not going to find anything. Bestplaces.net, that was that site that I'd shared for a little bit. It is very similar to datausa.io. They both have a little bit different things there. So I use both. Just play around with them and check them out. Rich blocks, poor blocks. So they have heat maps of areas, and they're very similar to Best Places and Data USA. Icomps.com, we went over that one. GIS system. So the GIS system will vary depending on what county or city you're in. So, you know, over in Arizona, Tucson with Stacy is going to look a lot different than here in Rockingham County's GIS, and same with even just Rockingham County GIS to Page County GIS. So you can use these systems to look up owner information, the last sales price, current tax assessment. Great to help you get owner information to get deals and verify what the assessment and taxes will be. Sometimes that stuff's easy to get, sometimes it's not. Sometimes they have more on the GIS system than that information. Sometimes they don't even have what I'm saying here. For example, the last sales price. But if you're doing direct marketing, then you can get owner information directly from the GIS system. And that's not a site. So you have to, depending on your county, either type in, for example, if you're in Rockingham County, you're going to say Rockingham County GIS just in Google, and you'll find the GIS for Rockingham County. City of Harrisonburg is different. You have to do City of Harrisonburg GIS, etc. So just got to do a Google search for that one for your county. Cozy.co is a property management and tenant screening software. Found that to be pretty helpful. And CESA is kind of the same thing. It's a property management software. So those are all some useful things for people that are looking to be landlords. Some other sites that we can talk about once you get once you get quite a few, like Appfolio is another thing similar to cozy.co, but for bookkeeping and screening and everything. Rent Manager. So if you have quite a few rental units that you're looking to manage, those can be good options as well. As I'm happy to share those in the chat if anyone thinks they would need those. Any questions or anyone have any other good tools that they want to share? Because I'm always open to hearing other good websites for real estate investing. Okay, well, I guess let's see. Any further questions? Any thoughts people want to share before we wrap it up for the evening?
You mentioned in the beginning you were closing on a mobile home deal. Did you want to elaborate on that a little bit more?
So we just closed on one that's 43 lots, 3 vacant pads. Everything else is occupied. It's in pretty good shape. So this one we actually are just going to be working on raising the rents over the years. We have some cleanup to do, just trash and stuff everywhere. We've had to put in, let's see, we just put in 3 new meter banks, have another 3 that we've got to get upgraded. So that's about a $8,000 expense. And then we are submetering everything. That's what we're working on right now to build back for utilities. So that's kind of how that deal looks. The other one is 32 pads with 30 occupied, and that also has a single family house. And that one's just, the houses are a little bit rougher, and the park similarly has a lot of trash. So we just got to clean up some stuff again. So, yeah, I mean, if anybody has questions on those.
Cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, they're tough to find. That's the thing that's tricky right now with the market is cap rates are so compressed. It's really hard to find deals. Yeah, thank you, Dave. Thanks for coming out. Hopefully everyone was able to find some nuggets in here that they found useful. It's a good amount of information thrown at people, but if anyone wants anything elaborated or has any questions, speak up. Happy to chat a little bit more.
Hey, Chase.
Yeah.
Hey, honestly, man, I've been to a lot of webinars and like meetups and community meetups, etc. But honestly, this was one of the best ones. So because you've given so much information and information that's actually valid, right? With examples and stuff. Everybody just talks up in the air and just talks about numbers and whatnot, flipping, fix and flip, do this, do that. But dude, it was amazing. Yeah, I really loved it. I'm hoping that you guys do this regularly so that I can attend it regularly.
Yeah, we do. I will say that this one's got a lot of info. Some of it, and not to make excuses, but it's tough sometimes to get all the same level of info on it. So it's one of those things that I really appreciate the feedback, and that's always so nice to hear when you put in work in something like this and someone appreciates it like that. So thank you. But if you're at any of these other ones, because we do it every third Wednesday of the month, and we're going through something and it seems like, hey, I would like more information, I need more detail on this, then just you can bring it up in the chat, or like you did, just unmute yourself and we can talk more about it. If we know what the answer is, then we'll say it. If not, I mean, we try to be pretty straightforward about that, because like the student housing thing, I don't want to speak on anything I don't really feel, what I
Correct.
mean?
Exactly. That's one of the points that I love, right? Like if you don't know about it, then you don't know about it, right? You don't have to like post it. So yeah, probably I missed the first 10 minutes. Did you give out any information or any slide about yourself? Or maybe you could bring that slide up. I can just take a screenshot.
I really don't have much. I mean, I can speak of my background really quick. We used to do this, and then it just seemed kind of weird because all the same people would come out and Mattias and I were constantly talking about how ourselves are. My background is here's our that's the business that invests in mobile home parks, which we need to get the site updated. But my background is basically 2012. I bought my first investment property, so I've been doing rentals and flips since then. And then in 2019, we bought our first mobile home park. So we've actually been looking since 2019. We kind of took 2020 off in a way because we just ran into some issues, but we pretty much been looking since we bought our first one in 2019 to buy other ones. And it's not easy. It's not easy to find them. And to be quite honest, the one we just bought, we paid up a little bit more than we would like, but we've got the seller financing terms and stuff to where it made sense for our investing goals. But yeah.
That's great. Yeah, I just got connected with you on LinkedIn also. Lion Crest, I can see you. Yep. It's just nice to talk to you in person, especially, and hope we can continue this engagement further. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for joining. And it's Ratish, right?
Yep.
This is Ratish. Okay, I couldn't see your name pop up. Okay, let's see it now. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, if anyone here or listening ever adds me on BiggerPockets or LinkedIn, I'm not very active on either of those sites, so don't feel like I'm ignoring you. Did I accept your thing on LinkedIn, Ratish?
Yeah, I guess. Yep.
Okay, sweet. Well, yeah, if there's any other questions, happy to chat about it now. Otherwise, our next meetup's November 17th with Rob Eaton. You'll be guest speaking on hard money lending. I know a lot of people aren't interested in that topic, but it's pretty cool in the sense of he does so much, and he does out of USA lending too. I didn't even really know how that stuff works, so he might speak on that a little bit. Yeah, so if there's let's see, something else popped up in chat real quick. Thank you, Stacy. Yeah, thank you for coming. Hopefully you can make it to the other ones. But that's it, everybody. You all have a good night. This, like again, we were talking earlier, this video will be on the website. And if you are not on our email list, just if you could throw your email in the chat really quick, and that way you can just be updated. We only email you about the next meetups. Like we'll do the alert so you know that the next meetup's coming up, and that's it. So if you're not on our email list and want to be, toss that in the chat really quick. And otherwise, we'll just sign off here in about a minute. Okay, sweet. Well, everybody have a great rest of their night. Thank you all for coming out. And again, check the website for the video if you want to check it out. Any of the older ones are also up there too. And looking forward to seeing everybody next month.
Thanks, Chase.
Yeah, thank you, Gavin. See ya.
Bye.